Hello, this is Dan Ferrisi, Group Editor, Commercial and Security with Commercial Integrator here at the HD-Based Alliance booth at ISE 2025. We're going to be talking about the return to classroom and really the prevalence of people getting back on campuses, especially in a higher education setting. We have a fantastic group of panelists here. We have Matt from Valens Semiconductor, we have Gaurav from Logitech, we have Joe from HETMA. Why don't each of you introduce yourselves in more detail and talk a little bit about your connection to the education market?
Sure, thanks, Dan. My name is Matt Snell. I'm with Valens Semiconductor. I'm the Director of Engineering Sales. I work with our partners and our customers to develop hardware based on HDBaseT and compatible technologies for the education market and other markets to bring the value of simplicity, connectivity to that hardware to further enhance what these guys are making for the education market.
Thank you, Matt. My name is Gaurav Bradoo. I'm responsible for product management and portfolio curation within Logitech, specifically looking at our verticals within education. And there's been this huge focus for us looking at how we can enhance that educational experience both for the learners, the educators, and most importantly, the AV folks who are enabling that system to function and set up and be managed.
Yeah, and I'm Joe Way. So I am my day job is the executive director of digital spaces at UCLA, but also co-founder of HETMA, the Higher Education Technology and Managers Alliance, that is an advocacy organization for the higher ed vertical to be able to bring all of our partners together so that we can bring the right solutions to all of our college campuses. And most importantly, a founding member of the Dan Ferrisi fan club.
The founding and only member of the club to date. So your position with HETMA puts you in a prime position, I think, to talk about some of the trends, some of the factors that are driving the return to campus, the return to classroom. What would you say are the principal factors that are making it the case that people are not necessarily learning at home as much anymore? They want to get back on campus. And, of course, universities want them back on campus.
I mean, surprise, surprise, how about the most hidden, unknown, but really fact is that college campuses are actually businesses, right? And butts in seats and selling food and selling, parking spots and selling, housing actually keeps the organization moving forward, right? So that is a driver to get people back. It's part of our funding model. But beyond that, we saw that from the movement of the pandemic, right? When everyone said, okay, we're going to go online. And then we all remember, oh, we're never going back. And, all right, fast forward 5 years and we're all back, right? Because the fact is that's what our students want, right? We might have multiple modalities of teaching, but the fact is that college kids want to go to college, right? Doesn't mean they're fine maybe taking things online, they're doing different modalities, but we saw that shift. And so what we're doing, for example, at UCLA and what we're seeing in the higher ed vertical is how can we bring our services to our students, right? And how can we make sure that their experience is not just a talking head, right? Which might have been the case before the pandemic. And how can we bring that experience to them? And can we use all of our spaces in that way? And that's where you see things like Logitech, right? Being able to come in and go, hey, we're not just, a camera or whatever or a microphone, whatever. We're actually essential to be able to have a multimodal delivery of our education system because that's what our students are asking for.
Absolutely.
So Gaurav, I'm interested in, from your perspective, what are the fundamental underpinnings of, or the anatomy of the ideal return to classroom system? What is fundamental or anatomical to a system like that?
Thank you. I think first and foremost, to what Joe said earlier, we think that there's this notion of multimodality and that exists at different scales. All right, like you may have, you was a perfect example that you said, like the students want to come back and interact with their professors, with their peers, but we're hearing students say, hey, I really don't want to wake up for that 7 a.m. class or 8 a.m. class and schlep myself all the way from my dorm room to the classroom. But then I'll be fine coming in for the 10 a.m. lecture that I have following that. So for them, they're like, give me the content wherever I am, and then even if I'm physically in the classroom, give me that content, and then let me be able to take that video content, that audio content, and take it at my own pace. So that's first and foremost, recognizing that these students are going to live these fluid lives on campus, in the classroom. And to that end, then, what becomes critical for that anatomy of the classroom is recognizing that across the different scales, whether it's your professor at a desk creating that content, all the way to whether they're in a lecture hall creating that content and sharing that content, making sure that the systems are scalable, they're standardized, they're actually vetted by the AV teams, the professors, and the students. Those are critical elements that sort of work regardless of what scale you're operating at, whether it's a one-person desk and you're doing remote education, or you're in the actual physical classroom engaging with the professor and the content that you're receiving through video or audio.
I'm going to steal your show, and because I want to bounce off that, because one of the things that we've seen over the last few years is there is a serious economic shift in higher education, right? We've seen it regardless of the political structure that currently goes on, all of that. We're having to find ways to maximize our budgets, right? And so by being able to have certain technologies like we're here at HD-based, right, and have those things where we can scale that, which is exactly where you went, because, at UCLA, it turns out that real estate in Beverly Hills is kind of expensive, right? So we can't throw new buildings up. But if we can think about the multimodalities, exactly what we were just talking about, and go, okay, if I have a 600-person lecture in a lecture hall that I used to have to book out 3 times, 4 times, per week, well, what if I can now take that and put it online, 1 or 2 of those sections, right? Now I've opened that up. I can now increase tuition because that room's now free for another class, right? So these are the things that we're thinking about as we're kind of readjusting post-pandemic thoughts, right? And you may have your show back.
Well, not yet. So, because I think the scalability, using technology to scale and reuse those rooms and reuse those resources, technology makes that possible. When the pandemic hit, technology suddenly made it possible to do remote schooling, something that didn't really exist, and we didn't even know we needed it until we needed it. But now, how are we going to reuse this? Now we're going to time shift these resources so that things are recorded, lecture capture. Students, that whether they make it to class or not, they need to do their homework later. They need to rewatch those lectures. They need those access to that learning at all sorts of stages within the day. And so being able to leverage all of these technologies together, I think, is made the return to the classroom much more valuable with the technology we've installed.
I'll go back to you right away, Matt. In terms of leveraging the technology, as you say, in terms of practical tips, technicalities for integrators to keep in mind, for consultants to keep in mind, for the channel partners who are going on site, working with teams like Joe's, what should they be thinking about when it comes to facilitating return to classroom in a way that's going to make Joe's job easier, professors' jobs easier, and effectuate a good outcome?
Well, so I think that guys like Joe that are in charge of defining what's needed by the students, they're working with the students, they're on site, they're talking with the professors, they know what's needed. And from an installer's point of view, or from a hardware maker's point of view, you got to keep it simple, right? You cannot let the technology get in the way of teaching. Right, the technology's got to be there to enhance the teaching. It's got to be part of the teaching process. It can't be the obstacle to teaching. I think we've all struggled with technology at various times in our life, and we still do. And that's one thing that we take very seriously with HD-based T, is we try to ensure interoperability and compatibility and simplicity of installations and compatibility across different hardware vendors so that the installers and the designers can leverage that technology from the right vendor to do the right job in the right spot in the learning environment. with that technology, and keep it simple so that professors can just teach and students can learn, and everybody just make it seamless as possible.
I'd love to build on that. I mean, to literally, the most recent announcement that we did is called the Logitech Rally Camera Streamline Kit. And it was our learning that was built with professors, with the AV and IT teams at universities, to really think about what can we do to keep that simple, not just for the integrators, where we knew, hey, category cable is pretty key, but we also learned that, hey, ultimately it's coming back to a compute where you need to bring it back. So with the help of Valens' technology, we've been able to create this super simple solution that can be mounted, inverted on a wall, and comes back to the compute as a USB-enabled product. So from a sort of system integrator standpoint, or even from the AV teams, they're not worried about, hey, now I need to sort of understand networking. It's simplified for them. And then most importantly for the professors, something that we saw was, hey, control in the flow of teaching. Those panels that you have, amazing for the large lecture halls where you may need to have complex lighting, etc. But as you're building out the small to medium-sized classrooms with the 25 to 50 folks, or even up to 100 folks, that may not be relevant. So that complexity factor we can bring down. And so all we learned was, hey, PTZ presets is this known thing that's been around for a very long time. Why does it have to be more complex than that? And distributing wireless preset buttons across the actual contextual part. So you have one at the whiteboard, one at the podium, and one at a demonstration area. And as the professor is teaching, they just know how to hit a button. You never had to train them. You didn't have to mark X on the floor to say, sit here, and then let the system track you. It's intuitive and in the flow. And you no longer have to have the giant sheet of paper that says, look at this particular instruction to trigger this particular piece of kit. And it's all enabled based on the insights we've been able to gather from the lovely folks at HETMA and the AV teams there, as well as being enabled by the technologies such as what Valens provides to us.
Ditto. No, that was brilliant. I'm sitting here going, yes, you're right on. And I think one of the things to talk about that is, we have to look at classrooms as all of our peripherals are just nodes on a larger infrastructure, right? That was one of the biggest changes we're seeing as we're going back to the topic of back to campus, right? We now, go back. I mean, last time InfoComm. We're not at InfoComm. We are at ISE 2025. Hashtag that. But when we were here pre-pandemic, right, we were in Amsterdam, we were all talking about classrooms as these like single unit things. Now we're talking about them in the sense of, I need cloud management. I need being able to, bring my monitoring and all of that stuff. So all of our classrooms now become, everything that's on it is just a node on a larger infrastructure, right?
And the classroom is not just the physical classroom. The classroom, the learning environment is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's at home to watch the lectures back at home. That's now your classroom. Your classroom is wherever you are, because the technology enables the classroom to be outside of the classroom. So you take your learning with you, which is great for everybody, whether you're in school, out of school, learning later in life. If you have a love for learning, you have no excuse, because the content is there and the technology enables it to be accessible.
I think that's a great note to close on. The content is there. If you have a love of learning, it's just a matter of finding the modality that works for you. And clearly, in person, in the classroom, is continuing to reinforce itself as central to many, many students' learning. Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you so much, Gaurav. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining me today. Really appreciate all of your insights and your enthusiasm about this topic. My name is Dan Ferrisi, Group Editor, Commercial and Security with Commercial Integrator, here at the HD-Base-T Alliance booth at ISE 2025, talking to industry thought leaders about the most topical issues of the day.